Okay, I'll be with y'all just shortly. Give me a couple of minutes here. I gotta eliminate a bunch of schedule conflicts right now. We got about 5 minutes. Um, Note this, please be sure to just post your name in the chat as you log on. And also remember to post your name again when you log off so that I can record your attendance. It automatically shows the date and time when you log on and when you log off. Okay. By the way, I will begin to enforce this as counting towards your attendance for the remainder of the semester after I post this on an announcement. Okay. Because I have not yet done that. I got waylaid like everybody with the storm discombobulating everyone. I'll be right back. Okay, we're about 2 minutes away from getting started. A few other people to post here their attendance. And I'm looking for my question bank from previous classes that didn't get imported. So it may take me a minute more. So just stand by. Okay, well, I am here, but I'm still looking for this, and it looks like I've just pulled up my summer class, and it looks like I had y'all do post tests on videos. So I thought I had a, hold on. Give me a minute more. See if I can find this because I want to go over actual questions. Holy cow. Hold on, I'm still looking. Don't worry, I'm still here. Dang. Okay, here we go. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over the actual first quiz. Be sure you understand this. I haven't got this posted up there yet. I don't think. I know I've added some announcements. But as I said earlier, if you joined us to begin with, then 5 minutes early, I think I mentioned something about everybody's been discombobulated because of the storm and catching up. And Lord have mercy, this week has been a challenge, and I would expect for y'all too. Um, but our dean of the College of Business and Social Sciences has sent us out the message at the beginning of this week and encouraged all of us to be understanding and accommodating for all of our students in all of our majors, so that we would understand that many of you did not have internet, shouldn't, and that we should not have had anything due because of internet issues with power losses during last week. This week, however, we were encouraged to be accommodating as we all tried to catch up and not put extraordinary demands on y'all, like, read this today and take a test tomorrow, So that's what I am attempting to do in my way. And what we're going to do today is go over exactly what kinds of questions may be on the first quiz. Once I post that quiz, you will be able to have 7 full days. If I get it posted today, you have 7 days from today. If I get it posted tomorrow, you have 7 days. So whatever date I get it posted, you have 7 days to complete it. This first quiz will be posted, and it will be based on how I'm going to ask you these questions now, meaning that it will be objective, meaning that, I'm sorry, I'm looking at 2 screens here. It will be objective in that it will be true, false, multiple choice, perhaps some matching, just depends on how I feel when I'm writing it. I write the test different every time based on what we actually cover in any given semester. Some semesters I don't cover as much as I like for a certain period of time that a quiz might cover. You understand? So I'm going to give you the full 7 days. Whether we get a midterm done before midterm grades go in or not, I'll explain how we'll cover that and assign grades. Okay, we'll grade you on what we've got. That's all we can do. So be aware of that. And if you have questions about that, then ask me. It is always my teaching philosophy to encourage that you take these non-threatening or low-risk quizzes in order to reinforce the material. They are low risk by virtue of being open for a long period of time to allow you multiple attempts, should you choose to make multiple attempts, to allow you to use notes because they're open-ended, no time limits on each attempt, that you then are encouraged to go and find the answers, to try to get all of the answers. And it reinforces the material for you. It's like what I was telling my 11 o'clock class that just ended, that you learn best when you read something, say it out loud, and write it. So you see, say, and write, okay? I've had colleagues, I was saying in my class this morning earlier that I've had colleagues say, and I've experienced the same thing, that some things that I learned in my matriculation through 3 separate degrees even, I didn't really fully learn and be able to recite easily off the top of my head without actually teaching it. So it was seeing it, reading it, writing it, but then having to actually teach it, whole other ball game. It just reinforces it because you have to, it's part of your job, right? And then it also becomes part of your profession and your knowledge base. So you see it by reading it, you write it, and you say it. Read it, write it, say it, and you will learn it. And that's what we hope you will do, at least the reading and writing it or responding to the quizzes will help reinforce that for you. That's just my teaching philosophy. TMI, more information than you needed, but there it is. Okay, so what we're going to do is go over the actual quizzes. Now, I found my quiz bank from a previous semester. It just did not get uploaded for some reason, but these are the same questions from the same material that we've begun to cover, okay? So as I ask these, you will get, first of all, a preview of what you will see on the quiz that's open-ended for you to reinforce the material. And you will get a preview of how I like to ask questions. I also want you to respond to me. I'll pause after I pose the questions to you and look for your answer. And I may lecture a little bit on each of these to reinforce concepts, okay? At any point, stop and ask questions, okay? All right. So if we were considering the different categories of child maltreatment, what are those categories?
Physical, mental, emotional, medical, but I can't remember if that was lumped in with physical or not. I can't remember from that lecture.
And then one more. Hannah or anybody?
Was it negligence? Or is that physical?
Neglect, yeah. And then one more. Sexual. Hannah, did you say sexual? I'm sorry if I missed it.
Yes, ma'am, but I might have accidentally muted myself before I said the last one.
Oh, okay. I understand. Okay, yeah. So, oh, I don't have my video on. And you'll see why in a minute. You'll see why I'm discombobulated. Because I'm just doing good to be here right now, frankly. So not my best look. Not a good hair day. And I'm not a cap wearer like some of my good friends are. Anyhow, yes. We started out the course saying that we like to, some of us who teach in this, who have experience in actual practice and working with children who are abused and neglected in social work, we like to say that all of these forms of maltreatment are exactly that, child maltreatment. When we break them down into categories, we have 4 main categories: physical abuse, physical neglect, emotional maltreatment, because there's both emotional abuse and emotional neglect, and sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is always sexual abuse. There's no in between. There are degrees, but there's no in between. A child who's inappropriately exposed to adult sexual activity is sexual abuse. Cut and dry. Okay. All right. So those 4 categories, and within those, on that Mayo Clinic information, they do talk about medical neglect and medical, well, I think I expounded on medical abuse in one of your, probably one of your journals, but I'm not sure I did that in a lecture. But medical abuse can be through Munchausen. Yeah, I did, because we talked about Munchausen syndrome. Munchausen syndrome by proxy is what parents who medically induce illnesses in order to get attention for themselves as the, burdened or emotionally struggling, grieved parent, saddened parent because their child has got this critical illness or is likely to die from it. And they actually are inducing it to get the sympathy from the nursing people and the community at large or whomever they interact with. So yeah, people can actually induce illnesses in children to get attention. That's called Munchausen syndrome by proxy. And then let's talk about discipline. We mentioned discipline. What does discipline actually entail when we're addressing child maltreatment? If I said, here's a question for you. Discipline is the form in which parents assert corporal punishment, period. Is that true or false?
Is it true as long as like they don't leave marks?
Well, that's true, actually, Shirlesha. That is true that it counts as legitimate discipline as long as there's no injury, and an injury would include a bruise. A mark would be a bruise, right? Like a belt mark would technically constitute physical abuse. But would it be abuse that would necessarily remove a child from their home? The worst outcome. The first time, here's a question. The first time a parent leaves a bruise as a result of corporally disciplining a child, which of the following would apply? A, immediate removal of the child. B, in-home family preservation work to keep the child in the home. I'm expounding on these answers and stuff, so you're going to have to listen and then look for these in your reading. Or nothing.
B.
Which would be?
Like, will they talk with the parents, like maybe alternative methods?
And try to keep them in the home? Yeah. Well, that would be true if they were reported. But if they are not reported, the answer would be nothing. So remember to look for that in the questions that you'll see. If a child is reported for a suspicious bruise, what would happen? They would probably have an investigation. A worker would come and knock on the door and say, I'm a social worker with DCFS and report has been made and I would like to talk to you about that. And they may want to see the child. They actually would want to see the child to verify. If they do see a mark and it's the only one they see, they're not going to take that child out of the home. They're going to talk to the child, encourage that they go to a parenting class or something, and they're going to close the case because it could have just been a one-time thing if there are no other indicators of abuse. Here's one that relates to this. Let me start over. The only source of verifying child maltreatment in any category, physical abuse, neglect, emotional, or sexual, is the parent's story of the injury that fits the injury's pattern. The only source of removal of a child would be, and I'm restating this so that you can be familiar with the same content, but in a different format. The only reason a child would be removed from a parent, if reported, would be if an injury was seen on a child. What kind of injury would it have to be? That would be false. What kind of injury would they have to be? Something that is life-threatening, right? So if you see a child with only one bruise and it's a, part of a handprint across his butt, then and there's no other evidence of bruises, then that's not going to necessarily get reported. If, however, a child is seen with a serious physical injury that causes imminent risk of harm or death, imminent risk is the key phrase there. So if a child has been, beaten and their head looks like a basketball, like the, almost 1-year-old child that was in the emergency room and, died on the ventilator, actual practice experience of mine, then yeah, you're going to report that, because kids that are less than 1 year old don't get those kind of injuries just by normal child rearing. So you would report that. But what this question gets to is those 5 assessment areas that are important for recognizing and verifying a dysfunctional environment that is causing an imminent risk of harm or death to a child. Those 5 areas all have to go together. They include, remember, we've talked about this before, I know. They include the child's physical condition, first and foremost, right? I just said, you see something that's that bad, like the head that looks like a basketball on a, less than a year-old kid, baby, then that's going to get reported, because that's not normal for a 1-year-old. That took the beating that child actually received. So that alone, but to work with that case, the worker who gets that referral has to verify not only the child's physical condition, okay, that's a check in this case of the child with the basketball head, right? But they also have to get the parent's story and observe the parent's behavior. There are 5 things, remember. So it's the child's physical appearance, the parent's behavior, the child's behavior. Didn't I tell y'all the story about the noodle juice? Did I tell y'all that one or not? I thought I did. Do I have a class today?
I don't think you told us that story.
Okay, well, that story basically.
I don't remember hearing about this story.
Excuse me?
I think I remember that she had talked about it.
Yeah, I did. It involved, in that case, was almost a 2-year-old whose mother we couldn't find. She told us stories that were not consistent with the injuries, and what she had was, the story was by the mother that, after several different versions, was that, well, what happened really was I made her macaroni and cheese, and I boiled the noodles like you're supposed to, and poured the liquid. I poured the hot water into a bowl, and she reached up and pulled the bowl down on her. Well, it didn't fit the pattern. The mother's explanation and behavior did not fit the pattern of the injury that we saw. the injury looked like a splash pattern. We're going to go in detail about these more later in the next unit after we get past this quiz. But the injury was in her ear, and it was most deep. The most intense injury was inside her ear, and it actually had burn injuries down her cheek and onto her chest area that wasn't covered by clothing. And those injuries were the ones right near her clothing, of course, were very slight. They weren't like the ones near her ear. So that suggested, rather than being pulled down on her, if you think of it, it's hard to demonstrate this, not in a classroom, but if you think of a 2-year-old toddling around, they're walking, and they are trying to reach counter height, it's possible, depending on the height of that child, that they could actually reach that bowl and pull it down. But if the juice was so hot to burn that much, number one, she probably would have let go because she'd have felt the emanating heat, or she might have pulled it down. If she had been able to reach it, depending on the circumference of the bowl, alleged bowl, then she would have pulled it down on her. And what are you doing when you're looking up at a counter that you're that little? It's something that's higher than you. You're looking up to pull it down, correct? So forensically, we could say that that was not fitting the explanation that the mother gave for the pattern of injury that we saw. So you have, in that case, the mother who also was not, in her behavior, would shop around from doctor to doctor. She lived in northeast area, but she lived in a lot of different parishes, right? And she had different records for this kid all over. And we found out with x-rays that the child had broken bones, broken injuries. We finally put together with the social worker who was involved with this case, the pattern of this mother being a provider shopper. She would go and look for doctors to treat her child at different places because she knew she had inflicted the injuries. She had inflicted that burn injury, and what she poured was hot kerosene in that child's face. And the child, of course, is flailing and, turns her head. And that's why it went in that way and run down that way. That's patterns of burn injuries. So by liquids splashing, in other words. So we have the child's physical condition, the child's behavior. In that case, the child was very indiscriminate in her attachment to lots of people, indicating that we would say that kind of wasn't that normal for a 2-year-old. They would be generally asking for their mothers. Instead, she was, happy and adjusted after she healed, of course, responding to any and everybody. She never exhibited any kind of separation anxiety whatsoever, which you would expect to see a little bit of, at least a little bit of that. So you have the child's behavior. In that case, we also had the mother's behavior manifested by looking for different providers for previous old injuries that occurred with this child, that she was not found initially once she came with the child to the emergency room. We had to actually call police to find her. Her previous addresses were not where we could find her. She had residence, but a lot of them was residence by living with somebody else there. So there was that mother's behavior, right? Also, whereas this one doesn't apply to this case in particular, it has applied to others that I've actually worked on, and we observe in assessing child maltreatment, and that is the home environment. What does a home environment look like? Is it chaotic? Is it strange? Kind of like a case I went to where the mother had a history of schizophrenia, and she had foster children in her care and treated them extremely rigidly. She had 5 of them, as I recall, and she also had it was really very strange. The place was immaculately clean, but it was overly decorated with, oh my God, I can't even tell you. It was really odd that there were so many butterfly designs in her house, and when I say designs, I'm talking about things that were like little statues of butterflies, a refrigerator. And when I say covered by magnets of butterflies and stickers, I mean covered, okay? On the walls, like a decoration lining the top of her cabinets, solid stickers of what butterflies, but systematic, you know. I mean, it was weird. It was really weird. And then when she called the children in, they came in, they didn't say a word. And we're talking like about 5th grade on down. None that were babies though. They were all, you know, school age kids. And they came in immediately, were in the back room, came in immediately, sat down in the living room floor, and did not speak until I spoke to them. These are foster kids. Now, we haven't talked about this, and this isn't on your test, what I'm not talking about now as a case, but in that particular case, what we know about foster kids is that that's very atypical. There was some kind of major intimidation going on for those kids to behave that way, because children who are in foster care do not uniformly, when they're from different homes, and those kids were, they were not what we call a sibling group, do not all uniformly act in that way. In fact, these were a lot of things that we were hearing that caused me to have to go in and meet with that family to determine what else we needed to do. So those 5 assessment areas that you need. In the case of the child with the noodle juice, the situation was that we couldn't find a home that she'd been in long enough to be able to determine what the environment was. But the fact that she did not have a consistent home fit that criteria. You see that? For the case of the child with the basketball head, when he was less than a year old, that they did have a home, but it was one shared by 2 teen parents who had multiple children, another one on the way, and just a mess, very unclean, very chaotic, utilities going on and off, etc. In the case of the mother who was schizophrenic, the foster parent, the home environment was clean, but it was odd, and it corresponded with these other assessment areas. But we wouldn't say that that home with all of those stickers and everything. I mean, I got a lot of stuff in my house too that somebody might come in and think strange, you know. That in and of itself is not reason to say, oh, because this lady's schizophrenia, she overdoes it with this stuff. No, it's all of these other indicators too. So I've given you 3 cases to illustrate these 5 assessment areas: child's behavior, child's physical condition, child's behavior, parents' behavior, the environment, and then finally, the parent-child interaction. And this is a tricky one that we'll talk more about, but we've introduced these 5. So the parent-child interaction, if it looks unhealthy for any reason, that is another indicator. But we look at all 5 of those assessment areas before we determine a child has to be removed. So if I ask you a question, like I started out this little mini lecture, is a child who is seen with a one-time bruise and no other evidence of child maltreatment could be automatically removed from the home, that would be false, right? If I asked what other of the that's right. And so what other of the following assessment areas are needed? And you might see a list, and the way we are taught to create questions that we try to make effective, and test you on material that you're actually studying and lectured on, that we sometimes will embed in a multiple choice item a list of things that doesn't fit. So you always look for that, right? You look for all the items in a list of multiple choices that most fits the answer that's sought. So if I said, how did I put it? The And I'm not reading these exactly because obviously I want you to look for these. I'm giving you the context of these items, right? So if the question was the bruise is the only reason that you would assess physical abuse, what else would be needed? You would look in that list at least one or more of those other 4 assessment areas, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Because all I would give you in what's called the stem of that question, a multiple choice question, would be physical appearance, right? So you would look for those others in a multiple choice. And if I just straight out gave you a multiple true false question and said, a child can only be removed from their home if a bruise, even with no other history, is seen of child maltreatment, that would be false, right?
Yes, ma'am.
If a child is seen with a bruise with no other bruises seen, they are automatically removed from the home. That's false. If a child is referred to child protection for investigation because they heard kids yelling next door, the likelihood for removal is increased. True or false?
True, since they have to investigate it.
They have to follow up with it, but they would not remove a child on that alone. When we talk about the child abuse reporting law, here's a question. All professionals and the general public are mandated reporters. True or false? All professionals and the general public are mandated reporters. True or false? True.
True.
Okay. So who are mandated reporters? Mandated reporters are people who have to report under penalty of law. The general public, all of the general public does not have that same consequence. If they see abuse, say in a store somewhere, or they hear it next door or whatever, and they don't report it, they don't suffer any legal consequence. Only professionals do. So only professionals, therefore, are mandated reporters. And furthermore, mandated reporter can be anyone who encounters or works specifically with children in the course of their work. So that includes a broad range of people who are professionals. Obviously, that includes those who are most likely to see evidence of immediate life-threatening abuse. That would include people who are nurses, doctors, social workers, teachers, any kind of allied health provider, any kind of special education provider, and it would include every discipline in medical fields and educational fields, right? It would include the police. It would include firefighters. So anyone who has cause to believe a child is abused and neglected and is a professional or engages in a professional occupation is a mandated reporter. The general public is not. What differentiates is the legal obligations and the penalties if those obligations are not or found to not have been acted upon. So in other words, if you see a child who's just, you see like bruises from head to toe when they come in to see you in the clinic and you're the nurse practitioner maybe, and you just go, oh my God, that looks like abuse, but I mean, the mom seems okay, so I'm not gonna deal with it. And later that child goes home to die, you're going to suffer a consequence, because if it's found that you were the last person, that nurse practitioner, to see that child before it went home and died, that's going to come back to you. Just like on, oh Lord, I'm concentrating on the quiz and that Netflix show about Hernandez, right? Yeah. So about that child, Hernandez, the Hernandez child, right? So the last people to see that child was not the teacher. She was reporting. It was the social workers. So that's why they went to court. Okay. What role does child development play in understanding when a child might be experiencing maltreatment?
In certain cases, when a child is being abused, they will miss critical development cues. Like, let's say a child is being abused early on, they probably won't start talking when normally children around their age will start talking, or uh they probably won't associate and communicate with other children because they are in abusive environments.
Exactly right. They'll miss developmental milestones is a short answer. You're exactly right. And Miles, did you write me that you're getting deployed or assigned somewhere?
Oh no, man, my parents would kill me if I joined the military.
Oh, really? Oh, okay. Well, I'm very sorry. I thought that was you. So someone else. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Okay. Well, what are you an only son?
I'm the oldest by like a big amount. So yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, after World War II, if you only had one son, that person couldn't join the military. It's still the rule today, as I understand it.
Yes.
Anyway, that has nothing to do with our course, but thank you. You're exactly right, Miles. That's exactly right. Developmental milestones are important, and they're important in every aspect of a child's development. So that is their growth, their behavior, their social interaction, their socio-emotional interaction, their cognitive abilities, their speech. All of those are areas that are assessed and generally are assessed with developmental tests that pediatricians will routinely do, especially in the first year of life, and then thereafter as immunizations generally occur, and at least a minimum of annual checkups are required in that first 5 years of life for sure, and expected thereafter, at least annually. So for school immunizations, if nothing else. So that's exactly right. And when a child manifests those that Miles was telling us, which are, I would say, socio-emotional, largely socio-emotional. That's not all you were talking about, of course, I know, but also physical. If a child is, as we spoke once before, I believe, is seen by a dentist, and they're coming in at 7 years old and they have a history of never having been treated by a dentist, and they have horrible tooth loss that's not just by normal loss of teeth at those age ranges, right, at 7 years old, then that suggests that there's some kind of serious neglect going on there, that a dentist would be behooved to refer, because that is a growth developmental issue that's not been addressed. There are also other developmental patterns in growth that are associated with neglect that this won't be on this quiz in midterm, but it will be on what we study next. And that is that the children who do not have adequate nutrition or are denied nutrition, either deliberately or because the parents just don't have the means or ability to secure adequate nutrition, whether by food banks or, begging food or whatever it takes, that children will show, they will show growth spurts on x-rays, particularly of long bones. And those x-rays will indicate that there's like a growth arrest. They're almost like growth rings, as I have learned it from medical people in teaching this class, that indicate that they sort of arrest growth, and then they have like a little shadowing, kind of, as I understand it, on the x-ray that will show that growth spurt. So there are other means to determine physical neglect as well as physical abuse that occurs and impairs developmental processes. And these processes generally in the developmental growth on all of those areas that I listed a minute ago, that they will show up as extreme in one or more area, like extreme withdrawal socio-emotionally, as Miles was talking about, or acting out for attention as another form of extreme. And I'm talking about extreme, maybe bad behavior as they get older, or just screaming a lot when they're two, So you look for extremes in those behaviors if we're looking at just that as one of the developmental processes. Okay, so let's see. Can you give me an example of what emotional maltreatment might be? What would be an unusual emotional maltreatment?
A parent being withdrawn from their child.
A parent being withdrawn from a child. We would expect that parent to be emotionally detached when we see them interacting with their child. Again, the 5 assessment areas. We would see the child manifesting some sort of behavioral reaction, either constantly seeking attention from the mother, who is just complacent, maybe even worse than that, they're just uncaring, totally ignoring a child. We would see perhaps a home environment that is not very stimulating, consistent with a parent who would not be engaging with the child and perhaps not providing enough stimulating toys, books, whatever, isolating a child perhaps. So we would see that parent-child interaction being inappropriate as you're describing, and then we would maybe not see physical manifestations if it was just child maltreatment. What would that tell you about child maltreatment as a standalone manifestation of reason for investigation that, say, could lead to having a social worker in the home for a while, or having to have a child removed? What would it take for emotional maltreatment to result in, here's another easier way to say it, what would it take as a form of emotional maltreatment to have a child removed just on emotional maltreatment alone? Can you think of anything? It's a trick question. Do you think it's possible that emotional maltreatment alone could cause a child to be removed from a home?
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of think it probably doesn't, since everybody kind of reacts to their children different ways.
Charlicia, you're on the right track. And on the first hand, we would say that a parent who cusses their child all the time, tells them they're an idiot, makes them do chores that they shouldn't have to do, that are way beyond their capacity, and then, belittles them and puts them down and just does that constantly. That's certainly emotional maltreatment, clear and cut. But if we never see it, much less can prove it, if there's no other adult or anybody else to corroborate, and it's only the child's version, we can't do anything. So basically, you're on the right track, Shalisha, that the reason child maltreatment in and of itself is not a normal reason for removal of a child, much less having a worker in the home, is because it's so difficult to prove. And for the very reason that people raise their children in different ways, and you have to have corroboration. Again, those 5 assessment areas. We would, if we had such a report, and we do get them, but when we go out, we have to look for all of those indicators. And that's what makes a child removed from a home on child maltreatment alone so difficult. Okay. Okay. I'm not making much headway with these. Okay, hold on. Oh, what is the primary duty of a public child welfare agency? Why do they exist? Why do child protection agencies exist?
To ensure the safety of the child by taking the necessary actions.
Yes, Kinsey, thank you. Exactly right. To preserve the safety of the child. Exactly right. Is that primary duty always carried out by removing a child?
No.
No.
Okay, that's exactly right. Why not?
Um, because in some cases, like the child protection, they'll just go in there and like they'll work with the parent, say, hey, you could not do this or you could do this more. Like you don't have to necessarily remove the child to ensure its safety.
Right. Now, we've not emphasized this in notes so far, but what we call that is family preservation, family support. So yeah, the first and most important thing that a public child welfare agency or a child protection agency does is preserve the safety of the child, as Kinsey was saying. But we don't do that by immediately removing a child. We first and foremost want to try to keep a kid together with their family if it's possible. So we go in to try to figure out, okay, what's the imminent risk? Those are key words in laws. The imminent risk to a child. Is it going to happen like any minute possibly? That's what imminent means. Like it's going to happen. You know, it's not if it's going to happen, it's when it's going to happen when you say something is imminent. Okay. So if we observe that something is not if, it's when is it going to happen, and it's likely to happen soon, is that threat there or not? And if it's not imminent, then we might suggest that and provide, if the family agrees, to preservation support services. It's always emphasizing preserving the safety of the child, but always also within the context of the family whenever possible. And we call those concepts that we'll study next time as family reunification and family preservation. Family reunification is first. Family preservation is first. Family reunification comes second when we have to remove a kid. As my colleagues who worked child welfare and retired, I've mentioned before, they say that we're always going to keep the kid in the home no matter what, because state doesn't want to take custody. We don't want to have to be the parent for that child, is what they would say. And that's true because it costs the public money. It is not beneficial always to the child if we take hasty decisions. Okay. So from the best practices stuff, the Minnesota stuff that we looked at, there was a description of imminent danger. So imminent danger can result in what kinds of things that you might recall if you read that? The pages that were assigned from those training manuals. What kinds of things can kids suffer that cause immediate harm? Risk of life, possibly even.
Was it like physical injuries?
Yes, physical injury. Yes, serious physical injury. That's right. But what if there's no caregiver in the home? What if you're like that case that lived in an apartment near the hospital when I was first started out doing medical social work that had oh my gosh, I think the oldest one was like 3 or 4. And then there were 2 other younger kids and the mother just left them for the whole weekend. Is that safe or life-threatening?
That isn't safe.
It's not safe and it's life-threatening because a kid that's not even in school much less 3 or 4 years old, as I'm recalling now, as I'm telling this story, is not able to provide adequate care for those siblings, nor are they able to protect themselves in cases of fire, of one of the children getting out. Knowing there's no age of reason there, right? So that's what we call abandonment. Abandonment. And sexual abuse. Sexual abuse is always investigated as an imminent risk of harm to a child. Let's just have a brief discussion about that, aside from what you read and content that you're going to be questioned on. A brief discussion about sexual abuse. When we spend a little bit of time on that category, sexual abuse is something that our laws, all state laws, as required by what organization, what branch of government requires all states to have laws to protect children? What branch of government, first of all? What branch of government requires all states to have child protection laws? They also require all states to have adult protection laws.
Is it legislative?
What branch of government in the United
Oh,
States? You're on the right track. This is how we learn. So you're on the right track. You know it. What branch of government? What are the branches of government in the United States? Maybe I'm asking.
Would it be judicial?
Is it the U.S.
Executive?
Department? Is it the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services?
And we call that the federal. I should have said level. What branch? So I would say the federal level, okay, or the federal branch. So the federal branch, state branch, and local branch. So I should have said level. That would have made it clearer for you, huh? What level of government requires all
Yeah, that
state?
makes more sense.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense. Okay. I'm gonna make sure I fix that question. Okay, so the federal government is what requires all states to have, so that we have national protection available for all children in the United States to be safe in their own homes, in their own schools, in their own daycares, no matter where they are and who's caring for them. If they're caring for them for a period of time, and they're responsible for their well-being, we in the United States are obligated to protect those children. And the federal government says so. And has this been true throughout history of the United States?
no.
That's right, because we didn't actually have that law on the federal level until 1974 with the Child Abuse Prevention Treatment Act, remember? Right. So the federal government is what caused all the states to have child protection laws. And the federal government doesn't say what those laws specifically must detail, but what they must have addressed, such as an agency responsible for assuring that child protection is carried out, that services are provided, what those services ought to be, and laws within their states that specify what the definition of child maltreatment is, that must be consistent with what is known and covers at least those 4 areas, however a state chooses to delineate those: physical abuse, physical neglect, emotional, and sexual. And then that they must have mandated reporters. And something we did talk about is that they must have anonymity preserved and reporting mechanisms, like a dedicated toll-free call-in number to report abuse, and that they can also report anonymously. This is a federal requirement that states must include in their laws, however brief or however expansive they choose to make them, because we're a country of states' rights, right? So we do federal mandates for things that every state has experienced, and every child in every state should have an opportunity to be protected from. So the federal law says, okay, we're recognizing this now. We recognized it because of a physician who wrote an article called Battered Child Syndrome. Remember that? You will have a question about that. So you should know that. So the battered child syndrome article published in 1960s by Henry Kemp was the reason why we ended up with a federal law, but it took 10 years almost to get it done. And now children are protected in every state. But every state has the right to write their laws as they see fit. But they have to have anonymity, a reporting line, a mandated reporting system for professionals so that public and those who encounter children in some capacity of their work are obligated to report under penalty of law. What is the penalty of law in most states for a mandated reporter failing to report? What is it in Louisiana? It's 6 months in jail and or $500. 6 months or $500 and or, depending on the severity of the injury to the child or death of the child or the complicity of the person who failed to report.
Just $500.
Yeah. $600 and or $500. 6 months in jail and or $500. Yeah. So I'm thinking that you're probably shocked that a kid would be worth $500.
It's just a little low price for a life.
Yeah, you got it. Exactly right. But see, the thing is that a mandated reporter who doesn't follow the law and fails to report a child who goes home to be further abused and it's tracked back to that person, then is it fair that other people may have intervened, that one person who first saw that child and could have reported it didn't? No, it's really not. So we have that range. So 6 months and or $500 is the standard for most laws in the repercussions for mandated reporters.
Gotcha.
So it's not necessarily that it interpreted that straightforwardly, but sometimes it feels like that, you know. What risks do mandated reporters make with their employer when they report a child that their supervisors will not? What's a
They
risk?
could be,
Go
they
ahead.
could be fired.
Emmy, well, you can't be fired. Legally, you can't be fired because that's called retaliation or recrimination.
Would,
But what could they do, Emmy?
would they be like a whistleblower?
Well, yeah, you could call them a whistleblower in a way. Yeah. But actually, in a way, you're thinking on the right path, but it's straightforwardly someone who recognizes their obligation to report, and they report because their agency doesn't. If they report, because first thing you usually do, most agencies have this policy, and it is allowable, that if a mandated reporter, say you're in an emergency room and the nurse and the doctor are treating a child, and you know, you're all saying, yeah, it looks like abuse. Well, yeah, well, here we go again. And you know, you're waiting for somebody to say, are we going to report it? And maybe you speak up and you say, maybe you're the nurse and you say, should we report this? Are we going to report it? And they say, no, we're not going to deal with this one. This is the first time this kid's come here, so we're just going to let it go. They'll catch it. And you go, whoa, wait a minute, it looks pretty bad to me from what I learned in my class. So you say, I think we should report it. And they say, we're not going to report it. I'm the authority. Well, the physician would be, right? So what do? You could go, in that case, I know from experience, you could go to the head nurse in charge for your shift in that situation in the emergency room, and then the head nurse over emergency room staffing and management generally, and then you could go up the chain in the hospital system, right? But what would happen to you? Do you think that doctor's going to get fired?
No.
Nope.
No. And part of the reason is because of not legal issues, but norms regarding the authority that physicians have over supportive disciplines like nurses, nurses, allied health, social workers, physical therapists, speech therapists, gosh, the respiratory therapist, the medical technician who comes and takes the blood, you know, whatever, the x-ray tech, all of those people are all supportive disciplines to the physician. The physician, hospitals exist for physicians.
Yeah, because it's like that with nurses. So even if the doctor says give them too much like medicine or whatever it is, and they're just following orders, it's the nurse's job to check them. So the nurse would be the one to get in trouble, not the physician.
You got it. Exactly right. I've actually experienced that in my medical social work career when I started out too. I sure did. On my master's level, I sure did. Whew. Anyway, that's another story. I'm not going to belabor since we're almost out of time. So yeah, that's exactly right. We call that recrimination, that they, or also another good word is retaliation by your employer. And what happens is they make your life difficult. And it's difficult to prove that somebody is making your life difficult on the job. You can go and report it, that I feel like I'm being harassed on the job because I reported this case. But in a hospital environment, and sometimes even in school environments, I have to say, you know, that can happen too. So it's really risky. And who knows if that Hernandez case on Netflix wasn't part of that problem. As I'm trying to recall the case, I need to watch that again. It'd be good for, I wish we could have that available to show on this course, but, or parts of it for sure. But I wonder if she did try to report it on up, if anyone remembers, let me know. Anyway, so yeah, the risk to a mandated reporter is that there could be a loss of job by making your environment uncomfortable, but is it legal? No, it is not. Are there consequences for the person who makes your job difficult in retaliation? Technically, yes, but are they often followed through upon? No, sadly, no. Okay, so what else would y'all like clarification on in our impromptu review? Anything?
I think I'm okay, Dr. Savage.
Okay. All right. Let me just review one more time with you the procedures that I follow. And now I'm going to try to share my screen because I didn't want to share my screen with my quizzes on there because I want you to work for those answers. Okay. So y'all can see my screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you see it moving?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, notice I'm in 2019, so let's go home and go back to your course. It's just reinforcing, okay? So what you will be tested on is material only under requirements. So information here, which we started out in, I'm sorry, I can't remember which one of you were telling me about the categories, and you were basically, I think it was you, Hannah, maybe listing those that were listed in the Mayo Clinic. Just remember they fall, no matter if it's Mayo Clinic or whatever discipline is breaking down these forms of maltreatment, that they basically generally cover 4 areas: physical abuse, physical neglect, emotional, and sexual, right? Okay. So this material from your training manuals and the pages that were specified, and not all pages were specified, but I wanted you to look at these guides on these pages as noted up here. Okay, so the page 35 to 30 to 56 in those pages. And the readings here, okay? This complex trauma and impact on childhood development, and that's what we covered some, and Miles, you were talking some about some of that material. The reading assignments here in the assigned chapters here. The information about assessment on ACEs. Oh, that was just the test, okay. well, I'm not going to ask you any specific question from the test itself, but about some of the points that were discussed and maybe referenced in these chapters here. Okay. And then let me go back here. Okay. So only Unit 2, the materials you'll be looking for or through for your answers to your quiz, which you have unlimited attempts, one from the day it's posted. Your highest grade is recorded, no matter how many attempts you take. I want you to get all 50 points because that shows effort, and it shows that you're diligently learning the material by having to go search for it if you don't know it immediately and answering a question. Okay. So only from required materials on Unit 1 and Unit 2. Okay. And you got more Unit 1. Oh, I forgot to ask about the 4 types of parenting and their effects, and a little bit about temperament. Remember, we talked a little bit about nature and nurture, and it's the interaction of nature times nurture. You can't really untangle all of that because it takes all of that to form personalities and how we mature as adults and become parents, and how we parent even. So we look for goodness of fit. There is a question about goodness of fit. All of the stuff about temperament and parenting we lectured about regarding goodness of fit. Okay, and then another website that had to do with from birth to age 3. That's what 0 to 3 is about regarding temperament. So a lot of stuff about temperament there and parenting styles. Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Oh, ma'am.
I sure hope all of y'all did okay with that winter storm. It was really, really weird. And driving home, I got stuck in Birmingham because my husband said, don't come home on Sunday because it wasn't melted then. And it was just starting to melt on Monday. And when I drove home on Tuesday, there was still, in Marion anyway, there were like huge patches of snow still. And it was already getting up into the 60s by then. It was crazy. And then when I turned on my dirt road coming in here, there were still like little patches of melting ice, muddiness on the dirt road going up to my driveway. So what was y'all's experiences? How long did it take you to recover?
My car was under snow, like could not move my car until Friday. So Sunday to Friday.
Oh, Reagan, wow.
So I
Golly.
just had to bum a ride off of some people if I needed to go to the store.
Oh, wow. Golly. That's crazy. So are
Yeah,
you go ahead, Skylar.
I was stuck in Shreveport the whole week because that's where I'm from. So I actually went home that Friday and was supposed to come back that Sunday, but the snowstorm hit, so I was actually stuck down there for the whole week until like the following Sunday.
That's you, Shirleisha, telling that? Because I see Skylar's got her mic open too. I wanted to hear from her too. So that was you? Who is this?
Oh, this is Skylar.
Okay. Oh, okay. All right. Well, yeah. So exactly. If you were in Shreveport, oh my goodness. Yeah. Shreveport was like Texas. My daughter moved from San Antonio to Birmingham, and her, all of her friends and family down there on her husband's side they were in a mess, as was on the news, but so was Shreveport, all the way from Dallas with below 0 to Shreveport. It was on the news too. And we had probably, in my estimation, from what I heard, probably a lot of in North Louisiana through to Monroe, the same stuff they had in Shreveport too, or at least 7/8 of what you had in Shreveport, it sounded like to me. So it was.
Did you hear what the electrical companies were doing in Texas, Dr. Savage?
No, what?
So like, you know how electricity is like not even $1 per unit of what you use or whatever?
Yeah.
Well, they were charging people 15 per unit. So people's electricity for like a day of like using it and stuff for heat was like $1,000 a day.
Oh,
yeah, I seen that. Yeah,
I saw something like that on the news too. But also, I didn't hear that from my daughter regarding her friends. I guess they hadn't had their bills yet. I don't know. But yeah, I heard a passing thing about that on the news that I heard a part of. But yeah, that's terrible. That's really terrible. But I also heard I think my daughter also mentioned something about that it's something to do with having to pay for all of the electric companies that come down from other states to help out. But it's the first time I'd ever heard of the extra charges like that for that. So,
And I
yeah,
don't think they can do that if it's like a state of emergency, which it was. Like
yes, exactly. And
I don't
a
know
state-
how that's not a lawsuit already.
yeah, I agree. Yeah. Well, I hope none of y'all were caught up in your cars. I heard from campus reopening and different messages we've got about things that, like from our dean, for example, to be considerate of those of y'all who may not have had electricity or just getting it back at the beginning of this week or over the weekend. That,
Yeah, it was bad. It was bad for us. We had to put because our water faucet was just like dripping. It wasn't, our water pressure was really low. So we had to put like pots and pans underneath the water just so it can catch the water so we can boil it to wash dishes or make food or anything.
oh my word,
And
golly.
to like bath or anything. That's how we had to put the pots underneath the water just so it can drip. And it took like an hour just for the pans to fill up. That's how low our water pressure was in Shreveport.
Oh my goodness. Wow. Well, where I was, Birmingham got Monday, it started Sunday night, getting really cold. And we had Monday and Tuesday, kids missed school. My daughter's kids missed school, and my son's kids missed daycare. But everything was closed there too. But it was, everybody went back to normal Wednesday. It was still cold, but there was no remaining ice or snow because they were on I guess that part of Alabama was on the outer bands of the weather system or something. But yeah, man, I was worried about everybody. So, gosh, but yeah, we had apparently some students who were trying to stay warm in their cars, kind of like they were reporting folks from Texas were doing when they got stuck. That I was glad to hear that our maintenance people and some others were on campus to try to help with those students. So I was kind of glad about that. Hope none of that was applicable to y'all. So I'm glad to hear you're all in class and that we can kind of get back to normal. Now let's pray for no tornadoes or other bad weather. Okay, well, look for that to be posted. Remember, when I post it, you have 7 days, okay? If we can't get a midterm done in time to grade for midterm grading, then your grades will be based on just whatever is posted, okay? And if that means everybody gets A's, then everybody gets A's. It's not your fault, okay? All right, if that's it, I'm gonna sign off. Oh yeah, y'all remember to sign off too. Thank you. Okay.